The first signal came quietly, hidden in the endless hum of deep space transmissions. Most of humanity ignored it, a faint pulse, barely detectable, threading through the static like a whisper in a storm. It repeated every 23 hours, too regular to be random, too soft to be urgent. Scientists debated for weeks, governments shrugged, and the world moved on. But somewhere in that forgotten noise was a warning. One humanity wasn't ready to hear. At first, people laughed about it. News anchors called it another alien hoax. Commentators filled screens with confident smiles, saying humanity had nothing to fear. Earth was united under the idea that nothing out there could truly touch them. They had technology, fleets, satellites, and colonies spread across the solar system. Humanity had become its own proof of invincibility. The stars were no longer mysterious. They were trophies, places conquered and named. So when the signal came again, louder this time, distorted by what sounded like a scream beneath the frequency, no one wanted to admit the truth. The universe was calling back. In the great orbital cities above Mars, researchers worked to decode the signal. One young technician noticed something strange, patterns that seemed to shift every time humanity transmitted back. It was like something was listening, adjusting, studying. But when she tried to alert command, her warnings were buried under bureaucracy and pride. If it's a threat, we'll handle it, they said. Humanity doesn't run from shadows. The technician stopped sleeping after that. Every night she watched the monitors flicker with strange energy bursts from the edge of the solar system, closer each time. Weeks passed before the first ships vanished. Freighters carrying supplies between Earth and Titan went silent. Search drones found only fragments, hulls twisted and burned, drifting cold among the stars. It was as if something had torn through them from the inside. Panic spread in whispers. The corporations blamed pirates. The military blamed malfunctions. No one blamed themselves. Humanity had always believed that warnings were just noise until it was too late. On Earth, cities still glittered under calm skies. People continued their routines, work, entertainment, endless screens showing distant stars. But behind the illusion of peace, the governments were preparing. Secret councils met beneath the oceans discussing the growing threat beyond Neptune. They had received new data, fragments of language hidden in the signal, words that, when translated, carried only one meaning. We warned you. That was when fear began to sink in. Humanity wasn't dealing with a random anomaly or a lost civilization. Something had been watching them. Something patient. And now it was no longer content to whisper. In orbit around Jupiter, the first defense stations came online. Thousands of drones, railguns, and energy shields stood ready. Commanders gave speeches filled with pride and certainty. We are the children of Earth, one said. We do not bow to threats. The broadcasts were replayed across every colony, stirring unity and defiance. But not everyone believed the bravado. Some remembered the ancient stories about civilizations that had risen too high, too fast, and vanished without a trace. They wondered if humanity had finally joined that doomed list. When the dark shapes appeared beyond the solar edge, the instruments almost couldn't define them. No heat signatures, no engines, just cold, silent masses gliding through the void. Humanity fired the first shots, of course. Missiles streaked across the black, vanishing before impact. Every weapon system failed as the sky itself seemed to distort around the intruders. Then came the silence. A silence so deep that every transmission, every broadcast, even the hum of background radiation simply stopped. For the first time in centuries, the stars went quiet. The outposts near Neptune reported flashes, huge, blinding bursts that swallowed entire fleets. A few escape pods made it back, their survivors pale and trembling. They spoke of ships made of light and shadow, of sound that wasn't heard, but felt. They said they saw faces in the static, echoes of something ancient, something that had been watching long before Earth learned to stand upright. Scientists dismissed them as traumatized, but the survivors knew what they saw. And one phrase repeated among them over and over, they warned us. Humanity began to fracture. Some wanted to fight harder to build bigger weapons. Others believed surrender was the only way to survive. But no one truly knew what surrender meant in this new war. Negotiation required understanding, and whatever was out there wasn't speaking anymore. It was moving. Every day, the invisible tide came closer. Moons lost contact. Stations flickered out. The map of the solar system slowly dimmed, one light at a time. Down on Earth, the illusion of peace finally shattered. Emergency sirens replaced music. The sky glowed with strange auroras, energy spilling through the atmosphere from battles far above. People gathered in the streets, looking up, wondering if this was the end. Governments declared a state of unity, but even as they did, the world was falling apart. Old rivalries reignited, borders tightened, and panic grew. The proud species that had conquered the stars was now learning what fear really meant. Then, in the middle of the chaos, the signal returned, stronger, clearer, undeniable. But this time it wasn't a warning. It was a question repeated across every frequency, every screen, every human channel. Do you understand now? The words froze everyone. Scientists tried to respond, sending messages of peace, apology, anything to stop what was coming. But the answer that followed wasn't words. It was light, blinding, roaring, all-consuming. Entire orbital defense lines dissolved in moments. Yet somehow, amid the devastation, a strange calm spread among the surviving crews. They finally realized what the warning had meant all along. It wasn't about conquest. It wasn't about punishment. It was about balance. Humanity had crossed a boundary the universe had drawn long ago. Still, humans are not known for surrender. Across every surviving ship and bunker, people began working together, not for profit, not for power, but to protect the world that had once thought itself untouchable. Engineers rebuilt systems from scraps, soldiers refused to abandon their posts, and scientists decoded fragments of the invading signal, learning, adapting, fighting back. Because if there was one thing history had proven, it was this: humans don't forgive easily, and they never forget. The invaders had underestimated something far stronger than technology: the human will to survive. Now, as the remnants of humanity prepare their counterstrike, the question is no longer about survival. It's about justice. The warning was ignored, yes. The price was paid in fire and silence. But now, humanity stands ready to answer in a language the universe will never forget. The skies tremble again as the first human ships power up, engines burning brighter than the stars themselves. Across every channel, a single message echoes back into the void, a declaration, a promise, and a reckoning all at once. "We heard you," the message says. "Now hear us," and with that, the final countdown begins. The stars flicker, the darkness stirs, and humanity prepares to remind the universe why warnings should never be ignored. The next transmission will decide everything. In the deep silence that followed the message, the world held its breath. The Earth's surface glowed faintly with the lights of thousands of launch pads scattered across continents. Every nation, every colony, every surviving outpost contributed something to what humanity now called the Stand. It wasn't a single army or a fleet. It was everything that was left. Scientists, engineers, pilots, miners, even farmers volunteered. Everyone knew the same truth. This was no longer about dominance. It was about survival, and maybe redemption. The skies above the planet shimmered with the reflections of massive ships rising through the atmosphere. Some were old cargo haulers turned into makeshift war cruisers. Others were brand new, assembled in orbit from whatever materials could be scavenged. The hum of reactors echoed through the night as the fleet gathered above the blue curve of Earth. For a moment, looking up, people could almost believe in unity again. The same species that once tore itself apart now moved with a single purpose. But deep inside, fear still whispered. No one truly knew what they were facing. The first encounters had been too fast, too strange. The enemy's ships didn't use engines or emit heat. They simply moved as though space itself obeyed them. Weapons that once tore asteroids apart barely scratched them. And worst of all, the enemy seemed to learn. Every human countermeasure only worked once. Every defense line that held eventually fell. It was as if they were being studied, their tactics, their thoughts, their patterns, and turned against them. In the command center orbiting the moon, The fleet's leaders watched silent feeds from distant sensors. Out there, beyond the frozen edge of the solar system, the unknown waited. Its presence could be felt like pressure against the mind, a faint pulse that made even the most hardened soldiers restless. They didn't know if it was real or imagined, but it didn't matter. The effect was the same. Everyone could feel that something vast was watching them back. The engineers called it the Shadow Zone, a region beyond Neptune where signals vanished, where light bent strangely and time itself seemed to stretch. Every probe sent there disappeared except for one. That probe came back in pieces, its data storage corrupted except for a single frame, a shape surrounded by darkness, faintly glowing like an inverted star. The image haunted everyone who saw it. It wasn't a ship or a planet. It was something else entirely, a structure, or maybe a living thing. No one could decide. On Earth, people clung to hope. Broadcasts showed smiling faces of families waving at the night sky, sending messages to loved ones who had joined the fleet. They tried to believe that this was another war humanity could win, another storm that would pass. But behind those brave faces, there was an unspoken fear that they were already too late. The scientists who studied the original warning signal had begun to uncover something terrifying. The message wasn't just a threat. It was a pattern, a record of countless civilizations that had once reached out into the stars, only to vanish after ignoring the same signal. Humanity wasn't the first to receive it. They were just the next in line. Still, no one turned back. Humans had a way of walking straight into the fire, even when told not to. It was both their weakness and their strength. The fleet's main ships, known as the Vanguard Line, began their slow journey toward the edge of the solar system. Communication between them was kept to a minimum, not because of secrecy, but because every transmission risked drawing attention. The enemy seemed to hear through the void itself, tracing every whisper. So they moved in near silence, guided only by light signals and instinct. Among the crew, stories began to spread, stories of strange dreams and voices carried through static. Some said they heard their own names whispered from the darkness. Others saw lights moving just beyond the edge of their vision. The psychologists on board dismissed it as stress, isolation, or oxygen deprivation. But deep down, no one really believed that. Humanity had awakened something ancient, and it was answering in ways they couldn't understand. In one of the ships, a young linguist sat surrounded by holographic projections of alien symbols. She had been studying the fragments of the original signal for months, trying to decode more of the hidden meaning. The words that once seemed like warnings now began to form something more complex. Not a threat, but a promise. The phrases repeated over and over, layered with mathematical precision. When she isolated the core pattern, she noticed something chilling. It matched human brainwave rhythms. The message wasn't just meant to be heard. It was designed to be felt. Back on Earth, strange anomalies began to appear. Storms of light flickered across the atmosphere, electromagnetic waves that caused compasses to spin and power grids to fail. Scientists believed it was the result of the alien energy interacting with Earth's magnetic field, but others whispered a darker theory, that Earth itself was being scanned. Every living thing, every piece of data, every human thought was being mapped by something vast and intelligent. It wasn't invasion by ships or soldiers. It was invasion by understanding. The governments tried to suppress panic, but word spread fast. People began seeing the warning signal again, not on screens this time, but in dreams. Whole groups reported hearing a low hum in their sleep, pulsing at the same rhythm as the original transmission. No one knew how it was possible, but humanity's collective consciousness seemed to be echoing the message back, as if the warning had already become a part of them. Far beyond, near the orbit of Uranus, the first contact happened again. This time, not with weapons. One of the smaller ships, the Aurora, detected a pattern forming in the empty space ahead. It wasn't physical, but gravitational, like ripples spreading through reality itself. Then came light, not blinding but alive, shifting and folding into shapes that defied geometry. The crew watched in stunned silence as the void itself bent open, revealing something that looked like a doorway made of stars. They didn't know whether to approach or retreat. Every instinct said to run, but curiosity won, as it always did with humans. The captain ordered a scan. The results made no sense. The energy signatures matched those of human technology down to the smallest detail, as if whatever was out there was mirroring them. Then the communication systems flickered on by themselves. A voice came through, not mechanical, not alien, but human. It spoke their own language perfectly. "You were warned," it said softly, "and yet, you built your weapons higher." Before anyone could respond, the ship's systems froze. Every light dimmed, every console shut down, and the voice returned, almost sad this time. The others said the same thing. Then the signal cut, leaving the crew in stunned silence. The data they managed to send back to Earth before losing contact was enough to terrify even the most skeptical minds. The energy patterns in that voice weren't from a single source. They came from thousands of echoes, as if billions of voices had spoken together in perfect unison. Now the fleet knows the truth. Whatever they are facing isn't a single enemy. It's something collective, something that carries the memories of civilizations long gone. And somehow it remembers the mistakes each one made. Humanity's defiance has marked it as the next to be tested. Still, deep in that fear, there's a spark. Humanity has always found light in the darkest places. The linguist continues her work, believing the signal might not only be a warning, but a path, a test to prove humanity deserves to exist among the stars. The commanders prepare their fleets, knowing they might be outmatched but unwilling to surrender. And on Earth, people look to the night sky, seeing not just terror but destiny. The universe has spoken once more. The warning was clear. But this time, humanity won't run and they won't beg. They will answer the only way they know how, together, burning brighter than ever before. The stars begin to tremble again, and a low vibration hums through every comm system. The voice returns, colder now, closer. "You still don't understand." And somewhere, between fear and fire, humanity prepares to make the universe understand them. The hum of tension spread through every corridor of the fleet. No one spoke much anymore. The silence wasn't fear, it was focus. Every pilot, engineer, and officer knew that the next move could decide the fate of their entire species. Out there, beyond the dim light of the sun, the enemy waited. They didn't advance, didn't attack, but their presence was heavy, like the air before a storm. Every ship's instruments showed faint distortions at the edge of detection, as if space itself were being rewritten a little more each hour. Inside one of the command ships, the Solace, the air was thick with static. Screens flickered as strange interference patterns rippled through the systems. The captain stood at the center console, watching the readouts twist into unreadable symbols. The ship's AI couldn't even classify what it was seeing. It wasn't code, it wasn't noise, it was language. Something was trying to speak to them through their own technology, using their systems like a mouth. The communications officers stared at the symbols as they arranged into shapes that looked almost human. "It's not random," she whispered. "It's learning our syntax." Down in the engineering bay, the crew worked non-stop. They were rebuilding weapons, adjusting shields, and trying to design systems that could adapt as fast as the enemy. The energy signatures from the earlier encounters had revealed something terrifying. Every time they fired on the enemy, the next wave absorbed the attack and replicated its energy pattern. Their weapons were teaching the enemy how to defeat them. It was a war of learning, and humanity was falling behind. Meanwhile, on Earth, the world was changing in ways no one fully understood. The strange auroras that had first appeared weeks ago now hung over the skies constantly, shimmering with colors that didn't exist before. People began to feel the hum in their bones, the same pulse that ran through the alien signal. Some said it made them dream of places they'd never been, landscapes of light and silence. Others claimed it was driving them to madness. Governments tried to hide the truth, but word spread fast through the underground networks. The signal wasn't just in space anymore, it was in them. A group of scientists in a hidden base beneath Antarctica worked in secret to understand the phenomenon. They had discovered that human brain waves were beginning to synchronize with the pulse of the alien frequency. The youngest among them, a neurobiologist, believed it wasn't a weapon. It was communication. She argued that the enemy wasn't trying to destroy them, but to connect. Her theory divided the team. Some saw hope in it. Others saw it as the first step toward surrendering humanity's free will. Back in orbit, the linguist aboard the fleet had made a breakthrough. She discovered a repeating structure in the alien transmission that mirrored human DNA sequences. The message was more than a warning. It carried information, data so old it predated recorded history. Somehow, the same patterns appeared deep in the genetic code of every living thing on Earth. Humanity wasn't just hearing an alien voice. They were hearing something that had always been a part of them. That realization spread through the fleet like a quiet spark. What if this wasn't the first time the universe had spoken to Earth? What if the warning had been written into life itself from the beginning? The captains didn't have time to wonder. The enemy moved again. At first, it was just a flicker on the scanners, then hundreds of them. Shadows formed across the radar grid, each one approaching with impossible speed. The fleet took formation. Every human instinct screamed that battle was coming. Engines roared, shields flared, and the ships faced the darkness head-on. Yet when the first wave arrived, there was no explosion, no beam of light, just silence. The enemy didn't attack. They surrounded the fleet like a fog, forming a vast ring that blocked out the stars. Inside the solace, every system dimmed to black for a heartbeat. Then, the voice returned, echoing through every speaker. It was the same calm tone from before, almost gentle. "We tried to warn you," it said. "You keep teaching the universe how to hurt you." The words didn't sound angry. They sounded tired. Like something ancient repeating a lesson to a student who never listens. The captain demanded answers, shouting into the void, asking what the enemy wanted. The voice didn't respond immediately. When it did, it spoke a phrase that made every human listening fall silent. "We wanted you to listen. But you kept shouting. The fleet's weapons powered down on their own. Systems refused to obey commands. Every attempt to override them failed. It was as if the ships themselves had been claimed by the enemy." Panic began to spread through the crews. Soldiers tore out circuits. Engineers tried to cut power, but the ships pulsed with a life of their own. Then one of the screens came to life again, not with text or images, but with a reflection. The crew saw themselves, standing there, surrounded by their own shadows. The voice spoke again, quieter this time. "Every world makes the same mistake. They reach too far. They take without asking. They forget that every signal has an answer." While the fleet was trapped in the silent ring, Earth faced its own crisis. The auroras intensified until night and day blurred together. Communication with the fleet was lost, and strange electrical storms swept across the planet. Cities shut down, satellites fell from orbit, and oceans began to glow faintly under the influence of unknown energy. Humanity was at a standstill, forced to face itself in the dark. Yet even then, there were those who refused to give up. In underground shelters and mountain labs, people worked to find a way to send a signal back, something different from fear or defiance. One young coder developed an algorithm that converted human emotional responses into sound. It was raw and imperfect, but it carried meaning beyond words. It was humanity speaking through feeling. They transmitted it into space, a single pulse of empathy and memory, carrying the essence of what it meant to be human. Joy, loss, defiance, love, hope. The fleet received it moments later. The alien fog shimmered in response, shifting in color, its edges softening. The voice returned quieter than before. "This is the part they always forget," it said. "The part that makes you worth remembering." For a moment, the fog began to retreat, and the systems flickered back online. But then, something else moved within the darkness, a deeper shadow, far older, far colder. Even the voice hesitated before speaking again. "It's too late to stop what's coming." Back on Earth, the storms reached their peak. The scientists under the ice detected massive gravitational fluctuations far beneath the planet's crust. Something was awakening, something buried long before human history began. The data suggested it wasn't alien, it was terrestrial. Whatever the warning had been about wasn't just from the stars. It was from Earth itself. The linguist aboard the Solace noticed the same signal buried within their own transmissions, reflecting back from the planet. The realization struck her all at once. The warning had been both external and internal. Humanity wasn't just being tested by something out there, but by something within. The line between alien and human was starting to blur, and she could feel the hum now, deep in her chest, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to her. The voice spoke one last time before vanishing into static. You were given the message long ago. It's always been your choice what to do with it. Then the fog began to move again, not attacking but converging toward a single point in the void, creating a vast sphere of light. Every ship in the fleet turned to face it, uncertain whether it was a weapon or a door. The sensors failed to classify it. It was beyond measurement, beyond reason. As the light grew brighter, the captain gave the order to hold position. The linguist, trembling, stared at the expanding glow and whispered, "It's not a weapon, it's an answer." And just before the light engulfed them, the fleet's communication systems caught one final transmission from Earth. A voice, human and desperate, saying only 3 words, "We found it." The meaning wasn't clear yet, but everyone who heard it felt the same thing. The real war hadn't even begun. The light filled everything. It wasn't bright in the normal sense. It was something deeper, something that touched the mind before it reached the eyes. Every ship in the fleet hung suspended in silence as the glow expanded around them, wrapping each vessel in a pulse that seemed to breathe. The sensors failed instantly, overwhelmed by readings that made no sense. Space folded, time wavered, and for a heartbeat, everyone felt weightless, as though they had stepped outside the universe. Then the hum returned, louder now, almost like a heartbeat echoing through every wall. The linguist pressed her hands against the console, her heart pounding in rhythm with the sound. "It's reacting," she whispered. "It's listening to us." The captain turned toward her, his jaw tight. Listening to what? She didn't answer right away. The patterns on her screen shifted again, forming strange symmetrical shapes that flickered in time with her pulse. "To us, all of us," she said quietly. "It's hearing our thoughts." The hum deepened until it rattled the ship's hull. The crew scrambled to stabilize the engines, but the controls were unresponsive. The fleet drifted closer to the glowing sphere without propulsion. It was pulling them in. One by one, the ship lights flickered as power reserves drained into the void. The communication channels erupted in panic. Hundreds of voices shouting across frequencies, calling out coordinates, prayers, goodbyes. But beneath the noise, something new began to form. A faint signal, steady and deliberate, cutting through the chaos. It was coming from Earth. The message was short, just a repeating code sequence, steady as a heartbeat. The linguist recognized it immediately. "It's the same pattern," she said, eyes wide. The same one from the warning signal. But this time, the pulse carried an additional frequency, something human layered inside it, as if the planet itself had begun to respond. On Earth, the skies had changed completely. The auroras had grown so large they connected across continents, shimmering curtains of color visible even in daylight. The world's power grid was gone, communication fractured, yet people everywhere felt the same vibration in their chests. It was as though the entire planet had joined the same frequency as the fleet above. Scientists watched their instruments bend under impossible readings. Deep within the Antarctic base, the seismic monitors went wild. Something massive was stirring beneath the ice, something that had been dormant for eons. The neurobiologist who had studied the signal sat staring at the readings, her hands trembling. The magnetic resonance wasn't just energy, it was memory. Waves carrying echoes of voices, thoughts, entire civilizations. She realized the alien force wasn't trying to erase them. It was trying to add them to the pattern. Humanity wasn't being destroyed. It was being absorbed into something far larger. She tried to send a warning to the fleet, but the global comm systems were already collapsing. The pulse from the sphere above had grown too strong. In orbit, the glow began to shift, turning from white to gold, then to deep red. The ships closest to it were now barely visible, silhouettes swallowed by color. The captain of the Solace ordered the fleet to break formation and retreat, but the engines wouldn't respond. Every system showed the same message: command overridden. The hum rose in pitch until the walls vibrated like instruments. And then, just for a second, they heard voices, millions of them whispering in unison. Some sounded human, some didn't. The linguist's console lit up again. Lines of code flashed rapidly, faster than she could read. It wasn't random. It was a translation, automatic and self-generating. She stared as the words appeared on the screen, one by one. "Do you understand the cost of creation?" The captain froze. "Who's sending that?" The linguist looked up slowly. "Not them, it's coming from us." For a moment, no one spoke. The lights dimmed, and gravity shifted again. Outside, the sphere had begun to spin, drawing the fleet into its orbit. Each rotation pulled them closer, dragging them into a place where light bent and sound carried through vacuum. The viewports filled with impossible colors, and shapes began to emerge within the light, vast outlines of structures or beings, impossible to measure, each moving like thought given form. The ship's scanners failed to define edges, as if what they were seeing wasn't physical at all. Inside the Solace, alarms blared. Hull temperature spiked. The crew struggled to maintain oxygen flow as systems overloaded one by one. Then, as quickly as it began, everything went silent again. The light steadied, and a single figure appeared within it. Humanoid in outline, but made entirely of shifting energy. It didn't speak, but the meaning of its presence flooded every mind at once. The fleet wasn't being attacked. It was being judged. Across the remaining ships, the same phenomenon occurred. Crew members began to experience shared visions, flashes of ancient worlds burning, galaxies collapsing, civilizations falling silent after ignoring the same warning humanity had dismissed. Each image carried a single message. This has happened before. The linguist felt tears on her face without realizing it. The images weren't just history, they were lessons, recorded memories of the universe itself. Every civilization that reached too far had awakened this same force. Some had surrendered to it, becoming part of its endless memory. Others had fought and vanished completely. Humanity now stood at the same edge. Back on Earth, the ground trembled as the object beneath Antarctica began to rise. The ice cracked for miles, sending massive waves across the southern oceans. From space, the fleet could see the disturbance forming, a spiraling column of light emerging from the planet's surface, reaching upward to meet the sphere. The connection between Earth and the alien presence was no longer symbolic, it was literal. The neurobiologist and her team tried to evacuate, but the exits were blocked by collapsing tunnels. She stayed at her console, staring at the data until the last possible moment. The readings confirmed her greatest fear. The structure beneath the ice was emitting the same frequency as the sphere. Whatever had been buried there wasn't alien. It was human, ancient, forgotten, and now reawakening. The fleet's instruments confirmed it too. The energy wave from Earth synchronized perfectly with the sphere's pulse. 2 heartbeats became one. The captain shouted for manual control, but every attempt failed. The ships were caught between forces far beyond their comprehension. The linguist, still focused on her screen, whispered, "It's calling to it, like it's remembering itself." The voice returned, no longer distant. It filled the air with a resonance that vibrated in every bone. "Every world leaves a trace," it said. "Yours began long before you understood it." The words carried sorrow and finality, like an echo of something that had repeated countless times. The captain clenched his fists. "What do you want from us?" he demanded. The answer came in a single phrase that chilled everyone. "To see if you can break the pattern." The sphere flared again, brighter than a sun, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The fleet was being pulled faster now, drawn toward the center where light turned into darkness. Systems across every ship went dead. The only thing that remained active was the heartbeat, the synchronized pulse connecting Earth, the fleet, and the alien presence. On Earth, people fell to their knees as the sky tore open. The auroras twisted into spirals, converging above the southern pole. The ocean churned, and for a brief moment, every piece of technology on the planet came alive at once. Phones, screens, even dead satellites flickered with static images of the fleet, the light, and something vast moving behind it all. The image burned into humanity's collective vision, their own reflections staring back through the light, endless and multiplied. The linguist realized the truth just as the light began to consume everything around them. The warning hadn't been about invasion or destruction, it had been about choice. The universe wasn't testing their strength. It was testing their understanding of what it meant to exist among others. Humanity's reaction to fear, power, and pride had brought them to this exact moment. The hum grew unbearable. The crew could barely stand. Through the viewport, the light began to twist into a spiral, revealing something enormous beyond it, a shape so vast that it defied scale, like a consciousness given form. It was watching, waiting, as if deciding what came next. The sphere pulsed once more, and the voice spoke for the final time. "Now we see who you really are." The light shattered, and everything, Earth, the fleet, the stars themselves, fell into silence. For several seconds after the light shattered, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, no stars, just an endless, suffocating stillness that felt wrong in ways words couldn't explain. Then, slowly, the void began to hum again. But this time, it wasn't the alien pulse. It was something else, something unmistakably human. The fleet's emergency systems flickered back to life, weak but steady. The Solace's lights came on one by one, revealing faces pale with shock. Everyone looked around, expecting to see the sphere, the light, the end. But outside, there was only space. Empty. Silent. The captain blinked at the viewport. "Are we alive?" he whispered. The sensors confirmed it. They were adrift but intact. The other ships responded slowly, their signals scattered but recognizable. Relief rippled through the comms like a wave. Against all odds, humanity had survived, but no one understood how. The linguist pressed her hands against the console again, scrolling through fragments of data recovered from the final burst before the collapse. The readings were impossible. Every coordinate, every timestamp, every energy pattern had shifted. The stars outside weren't where they should be. Even the constellations were wrong. She realized with a chill that they weren't just moved in space, they had been moved in time. Back on Earth, the situation was far worse. The planet's magnetic field was in chaos, the atmosphere flickering with strange lights that refused to fade. Satellite images showed fractures across the crust, glowing faintly with an energy no one could explain. People everywhere could still feel the hum, like a vibration beneath their heartbeat. The scientists at the Antarctic base were gone, but their last transmission survived. One contained a single sentence. "It's not leaving, it's waking up." The fleet didn't know any of that yet. They were still trying to understand where, or when, they were. The communications officer tried to ping Earth again, but the signal bounced back distorted, carrying an echo that wasn't from any known source. The captain leaned closer to the monitor. The echo was repeating something faintly, in a voice that sounded almost human. "You're too early." Confusion turned to unease. The linguist began decoding the echo, isolating its tonal patterns. The results froze her in place. The voice wasn't alien at all. It was their own. Her own voice, repeating from the future. The crew exchanged uneasy looks as she whispered, "It's a temporal reflection of us." The fleet's navigation systems confirmed it a few minutes later. The solar system's coordinates didn't match their own records. The planets were there, but not where they were supposed to be. The readings showed a younger sun, less radiant, less stable. Humanity hadn't just been moved across the stars. They had been thrown backward, thousands, maybe millions of years. The revelation spread through the fleet like a tremor. No one spoke for a long time. If this was true, it meant they were stranded in an age before civilization, before their own history even began. The warning, the message, the battle, all of it had thrown them into their own planet's distant past. But there was something else. The sensors picked up faint signals coming from the direction of Earth. Faint, irregular, and biological. Life. The planet below wasn't barren or primitive. It was alive and pulsing with energy far beyond anything recorded in history. Yet the signal wasn't just from nature. It carried structure, rhythm, a message. When the linguist decrypted the pattern, her breath caught. "It's human," she said. "Or something close. That shouldn't have been possible." Humanity wasn't supposed to exist yet. But as the fleet moved closer to the planet, the truth became harder to deny. Massive glowing structures dotted the surface, not cities, but something older, more organic. They looked like mountains from orbit, but the scanners revealed metal and circuitry embedded deep within them. The captain stared at the readings in disbelief. "Those aren't natural formations," he said quietly. "Someone built that." The linguist turned pale. "Or we will." The realization hit them all at once. What if this wasn't their first contact? What if humanity had existed before, rose, fell, and was erased, leaving only faint echoes in the DNA of the world? The warning they had received in their own time wasn't from something alien. It had been from themselves, from a civilization that had already reached too far once before. As they descended toward the planet, the transmissions grew stronger. Voices, distorted but familiar, whispered through the static. Some begged for help. Others warned them to turn back. One voice repeated endlessly, "Don't complete the loop." The fleet entered low orbit, preparing to send reconnaissance drones. The first drone deployed smoothly, but within seconds it vanished. The signal didn't die. It was cut. Then another drone disappeared. And another. The last one sent a single frame before going dark, a glimpse of something moving through the atmosphere, vast and luminous. It wasn't a ship or a creature. It was energy, shaped like wings of light stretching across the sky. The linguist recognized the energy signature immediately. It matched the alien sphere. Somehow it was here, in the past, connected to this strange version of Earth. Maybe it had always been here. Maybe it was the reason humanity existed at all. The crew of the Solace scrambled to interpret the readings, but before they could act, the ship began to shake violently. Gravitational forces spiked, pulling them toward the planet. The fleet tried to scatter, but the same force gripped them all. The captain ordered counterthrust, but the engines screamed in protest. The light in the sky was intensifying again, folding over itself like a storm of color and sound. Then the voice returned, booming across every channel, not as words, but as emotion. It felt like anger, grief, and warning all at once. "You were given another chance," it said. "You still don't see." The planet's surface began to change before their eyes. The glowing structures pulsed, expanding outward like veins of light. It was as if the world itself was alive, responding to their presence. The linguist stared at the readings, her voice shaking. "It's reacting to us. It's remembering us." The captain tried to steady his voice. "Can we break orbit?" "Not without tearing the ship apart," the navigator replied. "Whatever this field is, it's holding us here." Outside, the sky fractured again. The wings of light descended, wrapping the fleet in a storm of energy. Time twisted once more, and for a brief, terrifying instant, the crew saw flickers of their own futures. Their cities burning, their oceans boiling, their world repeating the same mistakes. Each image ended with the same symbol, a spiral of light collapsing into darkness. The linguist realized it wasn't just showing them the past. It was showing them everything, every version of humanity across time, every rise and fall. Each one had ignored the same warning, fought the same battle, and faced the same end. Her voice broke as she said, "We've done this before." "Over and over." The captain clenched his jaw. "Then how do we stop it?" Before she could answer, the ship's main console flared. A transmission broke through, not from the planet, but from deep space. A signal identical to the one that started it all. Only this time, the message was slightly different. 3 new words appeared, pulsing through the static. "It begins again." The crew froze as the realization set in. They hadn't escaped anything. The collapse of light, the silence, the shift in time, it wasn't an accident. It was a reset. The universe had looped them back to the beginning, forcing them to relive the cycle until they understood the warning's meaning. The hum grew louder, shaking the ship apart piece by piece. Systems overloaded, alarms screamed, and the stars outside bent into spirals of light. The linguist grabbed the console, her knuckles white. "They're testing us!" she shouted. "To see if we can change it this time." The captain looked out at the horizon where the glowing wings met the sea of clouds below. His voice was steady, but his eyes were filled with fire. Then we'd better prove we deserve to exist. The sky tore open once more, and the fleet fell toward the storm. The light rose to meet them, and the universe held its breath. The fleet plunged through the storm like falling sparks, the sky around them twisting in every direction at once. Lightning, if it could still be called that, split the horizon, glowing not with fire, but with memory. Fragments of time shimmered in every flash, cities rising, collapsing, rebuilding again. The linguist pressed her face against the console, trying to steady her breath as the solace tore through the chaos. Every system screamed, every sensor failed. The ship wasn't meant to survive this, but somehow it kept holding on. Humanity always did. Below them, the planet pulsed like a living thing. The glowing veins that crisscrossed its surface now converged into one vast spiral of light. The same spiral that had appeared in their visions. The same one carved into the walls of ancient ruins across the galaxy. Whatever it wasn't just a warning. It was a destination. The captain's voice cut through the static. If this is a loop, we end it here. Aim for the center, no one argued. The engines roared back to life, and the fleet descended. As they neared the spiral, the light shifted, forming patterns, symbols that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeat. The linguist recognized them instantly. They were the same sequence from the original alien message. Only now. They made sense. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea. A message from the past and the future. You created us. You abandoned us. Don't make us erase you again. The realization hit her like ice. The sphere wasn't alien. It was human creation, born from a civilization so advanced it had transcended matter, now bound to guard what remained of the universe. They had become the very thing they once feared, and every time humanity reached that threshold again, the cycle restarted to test their worth. As the ships neared the spiral's core, the energy around them shifted. The field that had trapped them now felt like it was guiding them. A voice filled the bridge, not mechanical or cold, but gentle and sorrowful. You were warned because you were loved, it said. But you never listened. The linguist looked at the captain. It's us. It's our descendants, or what's left of them. The light around them grew blinding. Systems began shutting down one after another as the storm drew them into its heart. The captain gripped the console. Then tell them we're ready to listen. The linguist opened the comm channel, her voice shaking but clear. We understand now. Every cycle we've made the same mistake. We built too much too fast, thinking power made us immortal. But it made us forget where we came from. We're not gods. We're just trying to survive. For a moment, everything went still. The light dimmed, and the voice answered, softer now. Survival is not enough. To end the loop, you must choose differently. Choose what? The captain demanded. The answer came as images instead of words. Their history unfolded before them. Every war, every triumph, every time humanity reached for the stars, only to lose itself to arrogance. Then came the choice. Preserve the loop and continue existing forever in repetition, or destroy it and risk extinction. The linguist understood the meaning instantly. If we break the loop, there's no going back, she whispered. No second chances. But if we don't, we'll just keep repeating the same end. The captain looked around the bridge. His crew was silent, waiting. Then we take the risk, he said. We stop running from our mistakes. He pressed his palm to the command console, overriding every safeguard. The ship's core began to glow. Energy readings spiked off the charts. The other ships followed his lead, linking their cores together in one final surge. The spiral below responded, its light rippling outward like waves on an infinite sea. The voice spoke one last time, no longer sorrowful but almost proud. Then learn what it means to begin. The fleet dove straight into the heart of the spiral. The explosion wasn't violent. It was beautiful. The ships disintegrated not into debris, but into light, scattering across the planet and sky. Every spark carried fragments of their memories, their choices, their humanity. For a long time, there was only silence. Then, on the surface of the planet, something began to change. The energy that had once pulsed like veins sank into the soil. The glowing structures dissolved into mountains and rivers. The sky cleared. The hum stopped, and in the quiet that followed, new life began to stir. Small, fragile, but human. The cycle hadn't ended, it had been rewritten. The fleet's sacrifice had reset the pattern, not by erasing humanity, but by giving it a new beginning. The world would start again, free from the weight of its own mistakes. But just as peace settled, the twist came. Far across the cosmos, a single signal pulsed back into existence. Weak at first, then stronger, echoing through the void. It was the same frequency the Solace had once detected, the same pattern that had started it all. On the new Earth, deep in a cave by the ocean, a small child played with stones, arranging them in a spiral shape. She hummed softly, the tune eerily familiar. Above her, faint lights shimmered across the sky, forming patterns no one could yet understand. Somewhere beyond time, the voice whispered again, faint but unmistakable. Every beginning is a memory of the end. The screen of the fleet's final black box flickered to life, its logs intact. The last recorded message from the linguist played, her tone calm even in the face of oblivion. If anyone finds this, know that the warning wasn't punishment. It was a promise that as long as we remember what it means to be human, there's still hope, even if the universe forgets us. Then the recording ended. The stars above the new world burned brighter than ever, untouched by the old mistakes. Yet somewhere, hidden within the fabric of space, the spiral waited. Waiting for the next voice brave enough to listen, or foolish enough to ignore, and so, humanity's story began again, unaware of the echo sleeping beneath their feet, unaware that the warning had never truly stopped. It had only changed shape, waiting for the day when someone would once more reach too far, believe too much, and awaken what the universe had tried so long to forget. The light flickered one last time, then vanished into the stars, leaving only silence. But in that silence, a heartbeat could still be heard. Steady, defiant, human. The sky over the new world shimmered with a soft blue hue as dawn broke. The air was quiet, untouched by machines or war. The ocean stretched endlessly, calm and clear, its surface reflecting a sun that felt young again. On the edge of a coastline, the same place where the fleet's light had once descended, the earth was alive. Trees pushed through the soil, and the wind carried the scent of beginnings. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as children of their own rebirth. Far beneath the surface, buried deep in layers of rock, fragments of the old ships rested, silent witnesses to what had come before. Their data cores, once full of command logs and battle orders, now pulsed faintly, storing the memories of those who had sacrificed themselves to break the loop. The universe had not erased them. It had preserved them quietly, as if honoring their final choice. Generations passed. The descendants of those first humans who walked the reborn Earth grew in number. They built shelters, shared stories around fires, and looked to the stars with wonder rather than ambition. None of them remembered the ships, the warnings, or the endless cycles of collapse. But sometimes, when they dreamed, they saw flashes of light, ships flying through storms, voices speaking from beyond the sky, and a spiral of radiant energy glowing in the dark. They didn't understand what it meant, but it left them with a strange sense of comfort, as though something vast and ancient was watching over them. Over time, these dreams turned into myths. The elders spoke of the guardians of light, beings who had once saved the world from itself. They said the guardians came from the stars and left behind their souls to protect humankind. No one knew if the stories were true, but the belief kept hope alive. It taught the new generations to respect what they couldn't control, to live in balance, to listen to the world instead of trying to rule it. On a clear night, many centuries later, a young scholar sat by a river, writing symbols into the dirt. Her people had recently learned to read the stars, and she was one of the first to map their positions. She had no way of knowing it, but the constellations she drew mirrored the navigation maps once used by the Solace. When she finished, she looked up and whispered, "Who were we before this?" The river didn't answer, but a ripple spread across its surface, shimmering faintly with a light that wasn't just from the stars. For a moment, it seemed to form a familiar pattern, a spiral. Then it faded away. That night, she dreamed. In her dream, she stood on a metallic floor surrounded by soft white light. She saw faces she didn't recognize, heard voices she couldn't name. A woman's voice spoke to her gently. "Remember what we learned." The warning was never to fear the unknown. It was to remind us that everything we create reflects who we are. When she woke, she found the symbol she had drawn in the dirt was gone. But carved into a nearby stone was the same spiral, perfectly etched, glowing faintly under the morning light. Far away on the other side of the world, a child was born with strange markings on her palm, shaped like that same spiral. She grew quickly, stronger and wiser than others her age, her eyes always fixed on the stars. People said she was blessed by the guardians. She often spoke about voices she heard in her dreams, calling her by name, guiding her towards something hidden beneath the surface of the world. Years later, when she was grown, she led a group into the mountains. They dug into the ground and found remnants of strange metal, smooth, silver, and humming softly. It was part of a buried ship, its surface marked with an emblem that time had almost erased. When her hand touched it, the hum grew louder, and for an instant, the air filled with the faint sound of voices overlapping, like echoes returning home. The discovery changed everything. Her people began to understand that they weren't the first to walk this earth, that before them there had been others, humans like them who had risen and fallen, leaving behind warnings and hope. The girl didn't seek power or control. She sought understanding. She gathered her people and said, "We will not repeat what they did. We will learn, not forget." As centuries turned into millennia, humanity grew again. But this time it was different. They built slowly, carefully, remembering the lessons written into the earth. They studied the stars with humility, not hunger. When they finally learned how to reach beyond their planet again, they did so not to conquer, but to connect. Their ships carried messages, not weapons. Every voyage began with a pledge. We remember the warning. And yet somewhere deep in space, beyond the edge of any known galaxy, something ancient stirred. The spiral still existed, vast and timeless, observing the humans it had once judged. It no longer pulsed with anger, but with quiet pride. The cycle had finally been broken, though the memory of it would always remain, a silent safeguard woven into the fabric of time itself. In the vastness of that silence, the faint echo of the Solace's final transmission continued to ripple outward. "We are not perfect," the linguist's voice whispered through the void. "But we are learning, and that's what makes us human." The echo reached no ears, but it didn't need to. It lived in the stars now, carried in the rhythm of every heartbeat, in every act of creation and compassion. The universe, once indifferent, seemed a little warmer for it. Back on the reborn Earth, the same river where the scholar once dreamed now flowed through a great city. Towering structures of glass and light lined its banks, but at the center of the city stood a monument, a smooth, spiraled stone carved with words that no one remembered writing. It simply read, "We heard the warning." We answered with hope. Each night, people gathered around it, not out of fear, but gratitude. The monument glowed faintly whenever the wind passed over it, as if acknowledging their presence. Some said it was just an old trick of light. Others believed it was a reminder that somewhere beyond all understanding, the ones who came before were still watching. The story of humanity's rise and fall became legend again, then myth, then something deeper, but its meaning never disappeared. It whispered through time, telling every generation the same truth, that no power, no knowledge, and no creation could ever be greater than the courage to begin again. And as the stars turned slowly above the sleeping world, the spiral shone one last time, brief, golden, and pure. Then it faded into the heavens, leaving behind only peace and the steady heartbeat of a species that had finally learned how to listen. Humanity had paid the price, but in the end, they earned their place. Not by defiance, but by understanding. And in that understanding, they found the one thing the universe could never erase: hope.